Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only talk about things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, or art is out unless it relates directly to how the story is being told. I am Daniel Radford, author, amoeba, and also your host. And as we continue our cycle on the ocean, I'm joined once more by John Kernan.
Sometimes you have to be a parasite to stop a parasite.
Apologies, audience, as well, if we sound a little off or anything like that. We are both exhausted, and my asthma's playing up, so we may not be quite as high energy or as sound quite exactly the same as usual, but we're doing our best.
Ooh.
Yeah, that it's a busy time of the year. Not well, it won't be when you're hearing this probably, but a couple months from now. But you get the drift. Anyway, today we're actually retreading some old ground. Since we actually touched on this book and show in the finale of season two. But I love this story, and this cycle has given us an excuse to give it all of the attention it deserves. And I am, of course, talking about Frank Schatzing's novel The Swarm, which was also adapted into a TV miniseries in 2023. I am very excited to get into this one again.
Yeah, it's one of the more fun sides of environmentalism in media, that's for sure.
You know this well enough. Anyone who managed to catch the finale of season two, and I can't imagine why you'd want to miss that. Uh, anyone who knows me and knows how I feel about this story knows that it has occupied a place in the back of my head rent free since like 2011 or something. So, brief recap of the general gist of the Swarm. It is a very dense book, so there's a lot of ground to cover here. We'll see how much we can actually get through in our sort of hour or so. Kicks off a bunch of water related, like ocean, sea related incidents start happening across the globe. Fishermen disappear in South America. Strange worms show up on the ocean floor throughout Europe and the sort of Atlantic. Toxic crustaceans start getting fished up all over the place. Killer whales start going crazy and attacking people when they never have before.
Yeah, I was gonna say mad whales. You know it's bad when whales are mad. Whales don't get mad. Whales don't give a shit about nothing.
Not even the plane going over my. Why does this always happen right when I start recording?
That's how they schedule it. They know.
I'm starting to wonder. It doesn't even matter what time of day. But yeah, whales start going crazy as well. And at basically all of these scenes where this has started happening, people start finding this like weird slimy substance, or there's like videos of a strange bluish glow in the water. And people start thinking maybe this is related. Although we don't actually get to that point for quite a way in the book. We actually, for the like sort of first third to a half of the book, we follow people who are fairly independent across the world. They like the different main characters do not interact with each other much in the first half of the book. They're more in their own inner circles as we see how this whole situation reflect relates to them and their experiences with it. We've got over in Norway, we have our sort of silver fox science professor, Sigurd Johansson, who is primarily an expert on deep sea invertebrates, I believe. And he's called in by Statoil, this ocean mining and oil drilling company, because they found these weird worms they can't identify are suddenly present on all these methane hydrates, which are a very important part of the oceanic ecosystem. They're basically frozen water and methane, and if they get destabilized, bad things happen. I'm sure that won't have any relevance to later events in the story.
Yeah, it's basically a frozen gas leak just waiting to be exploded into the ocean.
And basically, yeah, basically the oil company is like, hey, two questions. Three, maybe, actually. One, what are these worms? Two, are they endangered, and are we gonna get in trouble if we do research and drilling here? And 3, are they going to be a problem?
Yeah, and it's pretty bad that "Are they going to be a problem?" comes after, "Are we gonna get in trouble?"
Yeah, says a lot about Statoil. Meanwhile, and he and of course Sigurd looks into it and he's like, "Yeah, this is weird. Like these are kind of these must be a new species because externally they look like these kinds, but internally they look like this kind of worm. I don't know what they are. You probably can't drill here without further exploration." So they start setting up like a proper oceanic research expedition to look into these worms. And then meanwhile, on the complete other side of the world, in Canada, in Vancouver specifically, cetologist Leon Anawak is encountering some strangeness with the local whale populations and orca populations. They've been weirdly aggressive, they've shown up at the wrong times, nothing seems to add up, and then suddenly, in quick succession, we have a whale watching boat gets destroyed and the whales just chow down on the people on the water, which is, again, never happened. It makes no sense. They do not do this. And then shortly
Yeah,
after, he is called in to investigate a problem with a like big freight ship, which has been screwed over by weird mutated zebra mollusks that shouldn't be there either.
by the way, I think it's an absolutely, awesome choice. That is just one of the little things that shows how much the author cares and thinks about this kinda stuff as it's happening, that it was specifically orcas, not just any other whale, because not only like, whales in general don't attack people. They're, either too big or too gentle to care about us, and they don't wanna eat us, so they have no reason to mess with us. But orcas especially are as smart as, maybe smarter than dolphins, and have been noted as it being believed specifically that they don't attack us because they can recognize us as a fellow intelligent creature. So if they are deciding to kill and eat people, something is seriously wrong because they know they're committing murder when they do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little like for memory, I didn't manage to get back and watch the show again or reread the book before this, but again, it's living rent free in my head, so I remember it pretty clearly. But I think it's actually a humpback that destroys the ship, like the boat, and then the killer whales do the rest. But another really cool detail about that, right, that becomes important later on is it's not residential whales. The whales that permanently live around Vancouver are not part of the attack. It is only transient whales who go out to deeper waters,
Mhm.
which I don't know if that gets mentioned in the show, but it definitely comes up in the book. But there's a couple of other people who get involved in this. There's Dr. Borman, who is like a marine geologist kind of guy, I believe. There's Dr. Roche, who is involved with parasites and the like. They're a doctor in France, and several others. There's also like other characters get roped into it that are just in the orbits of these other sort of more central characters, like Tina Lund who works with Statoil, is a big part of Sigurd's life, and Anna Wack is very involved with Alicia Delaware and Jack O'Bannon slash Jack Grey Fox, who are sort of in his orbit for various reasons, and so on and so forth. And then because all this weird ocean shit starts keeps happening, a big conference is called, and eventually they start going, "This stuff keeps showing up in these places. There has to be something related here. Is it like an attack from a terrorist organization? Is it just a plague?" And Johansson goes, "What if it's just somewhat like, what if there's an intelligence in the ocean that we've just never noticed before because they're different to us?" And he calls them the Ur, which is just keyboard mashes some letters together, gets YRR, and goes, "That's what they are," which is
I
great. I
slapped a
love it.
couple letters, and this looks kinda like a name, so I'm going with it.
Which eventually, that's like most people are like, "Yeah, that doesn't sound right." But led and funded largely by the US military because, of course, they eventually start looking into it because it's a very real problem. and they start coming to the conclusion, no, there really is an intelligent species in our oceans, and they are pissed at us, but the ecological damage we have been doing, and they're trying to take humanity out. Things start getting progressively worse, bigger disasters, like we're talking like tsunamis to end all tsunamis, horrible plagues, etc. As they start developing more of an understanding of the Euro, which turns out they are single-celled organisms. They are a collective of individual cells that come together to form an intelligence. They're incredibly cool, incredibly alien creatures. And at this point, the crux of the story starts becoming, do we try and kill them all, or do we try and communicate and find a resolution?
They might as well be the immune system of the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. And like the question, obviously, because of course the US government is very much in favor of kill them all.
And you can count on the U.S. government when it comes to environmentalism. We turn aircraft carriers and ships into coral reefs, so that means we're super green and gonna make everything better.
Yeah, so the first half of the story is all about figuring out what is going on and getting the key players to like finally come together and come to this conclusion and identify that the you are a thing. And the second part is resolving the problem basically, and choosing between destruction and communication. And it makes sense, right? Because there's no guarantee that communication can even happen. It takes a lot of work. They have to get Samantha Crow, who's from SETI, the alien searching people from NASA, involved. It's very interesting seeing where this stuff goes. And the show is good. I do recommend watching it, especially if you want to consume this story with less time. But because the book is so dense, both being character drama and plot events and scale, as well as having very well thought out science behind it, even though I would call it a good adaptation, it is so hard for the show to do justice to the enormity of the scale of everything going on in the book. Just as an aside. So I do recommend, if you can, if you have the time, read the book. If you don't, watch the show. Ideally, do both.
I almost want to see art of like some creatures that are obviously being controlled by the year falling floating down and giving way to the Cthulhu that shows up at the end of that deep sea exploration movie, and just do the villain trope. And the year being like, "You fool! I was holding them back."
That could be very funny. I wouldn't be surprised if that artist out there. But yeah, so that's a very rushed, brief recap of a very enormous story.
There's a lot going on.
But it's all very interesting. And that does kind of bring us into sort of a jumping point, right? Because in our previous episode, in the first one of the cycle, we talked a lot about what the ocean can be to a story. And many of those options are in play at all times in the swarm. We are simultaneously shown the ocean as a source of wonder, of mystery, and of horror at basically all times.
All at once.
The mystery obviously comes from the what is happening? Why is all this happening? How is this interconnected? Oh, it's the year. What the fuck are those? How do they work and think and communicate? Can we communicate with them? That's where the mystery comes from, and also just the general vibe of who knows what is in the ocean. The horror obviously comes into play primarily through, oh god, all this like plagues and angry sea creatures and all that, as well as other moments of more specific horror where you have like characters who are trapped underwater and running out of air and stuff like that. The more traditional kind of oceanic horror.
The wonderful horror that is, oh, 70% of the surface area of the planet, and the thing we don't understand and still have no power over has decided we have to go.
Yeah. Like, I think a really good example of how horror comes into play, in this story is a scene that they don't have in the show that is in the book is a volcanologist and I think it's a biologist have to dive and off the Canary Islands. If you don't know, the Canary Islands are a chain of volcanic islands. They're very isolated, and also they are somewhat held together by hydrates. And if these islands if the shelf around these islands collapses because the hydrates are destroyed, it'll be a landslide to end all landslides and a tsunami to end all tsunamis. So they like, we need to go investigate this place like right now because if the EU are doing something there, we are fucked.
Yeah, destabilizing the continental shelf is not something we could just, continue on through normally as a society.
Yeah, and we at this point we've had a taste of them doing just that with the continental shelf in Europe. And this would be worse. So they go and investigate, and that's not even that's not the horror part though. They get stuck down there in these like specialized like armored dive suits, basically shoved into the cracks in the destabilizing base of these islands, surrounded by your controlled hammerheads that are ignoring their shark repulsion stuff, just stuck there as their air slowly runs out, jammed into a
Yeah.
crack hundreds of feet under the ocean.
Yeah, a lot of stuff about sea creatures especially, it's real terrifying if it becomes their goal to kill us, because most of the measures we have to defend ourselves against, like, actually big, strong sea creatures only work off of the fact that they either really, truly don't notice us that much or don't care about us enough to pursue us if there is a mild discomfort to them going after us.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's the thing with sharks, right? That comes up a lot. They only attack us out of they're not really attacking. Either they have mistaken us for food because a surfer has a very similar silhouette to a seal, or they're curious and they don't have hands, so they're going, "What is this?" It's very rare for there to be like a genuine attack from a shark or something like that.
Yeah, it's just scary when it's put into perspective that, like, the only like, we have deterrence, not actual defenses against them.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, even with orcas, I mean, the books bring it up a lot, and even though they have started occasionally attacking boats in Europe now, they've never killed anyone. And it's very easy for us as vulnerable humans to be like, "Damn, the ocean's scary. There's all these dangerous animals in there that can do this horrible shit to us." But like, then you remember, but none of them are aiming to.
Yeah, for the most part, the only creatures that would, like, actively mess us up and tear us to pieces live way, way down where we either can't go or would have to work really hard to go. And even then, the only reason we would be in danger there is because it's a free for all down there. There's not enough food for anyone or anything.
Yeah, it basically it very the book on the micro scale for the horror basically very much embraces this idea of that. Yeah, you think the ocean's scary now think about it over the ocean that you are surrounded by no matter where you are, really. Imagine if it actively wants to kill you. Oh, and if you think because you're just going to stay in dry land you're safe, think again. Do you know how much of our food comes from the ocean? How many of our goods are transported across the ocean?
What would we be to do if the ocean were to, I don't know, Resident Evil itself up some bioweapons?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems that the year's attack on humanity takes the form of is a it hits France first. It's why Roche is involved. It is a parasite of which I used to know the name of. I've forgotten it now. It starts with a PF sound. It's like Fistifuria, something like that. I think. It is a really nasty parasite found in the ocean that has been like dialed up to like 11 by the euro and stuffed into lobsters, which are then served in fancy fresh restaurants, which then kill people and get passed on and so forth, and just becomes like just a wave of like microbial plague essentially.
Smart choice. People are never gonna not eat lobster. Not anymore.
And even you don't see it so much in the show, but they even after they have reached the resolution in the book and everything has been tentatively solved, an uneasy peace has been reached, there are still huge parts of continental Europe that are dealing with this like biological crisis because the haven't turned it off. They can't stop what they've unleashed here necessarily. It's just it's just a problem, and they're still dealing with it. So these micro horrors are, I say, like, I don't mean micro as in they're not scary. I mean micro in the sense of scale. These are very small, specific instances of horror in this story, which is not really a horror story, to be clear. It's a thriller. But then there's also the more large scale, just the ocean itself is a powerful force of nature and very destructive. And you have things like massive landslides called Storega slides, because when disasters get big enough, they get a fancy new level up name, and the tsunamis that follow and things like that as well. So scary ocean definitely a part of it. But what's interesting is that there is always this sense of wonder, partially from the mystery, because that is played both for horror and for wonder, interestingly enough, in the story. But because almost everyone in the main cast loves the ocean in some way. You know, they're scientists and journalists and environmentalists, or people who just have otherwise sailors and like have strong ties to the ocean. All these characters have such strong ties and such a respect and love for the ocean that even though all this horrible shit is happening, there is always this sense of wonder as well. And it's kind of a constant juxtaposition.
I always get a kick out of environmentalists getting brought on for things like this in stories. Like, hey, you spend all your time uh studying the environment and the effects it has on us and how we're a threat to it and all that, right? Yeah. Well, the environment's mad at us. Help us figure out how to kill it now.
And they're like, have you considered that the thing trying to kill us is an incredibly important part of the ecosystem and might also have a relationship with us we don't know about?
Have you considered we're not sure we would survive killing it?
Yeah, we don't know how they fit into the global oceanic food chain.
I think, sir, it may be prudent to realize the fact, which I know may seem obvious from how we got here in the first place, but actions have consequences. And I think the consequences for this one might be kind of big.
Yeah, I mean that because that's the crux of the main conflict in the second part of the book is basically, okay, we have found a way to kill them in theory. We think we can do it. We think we can kill the Euro, but should we do it? Yeah, they are actively hunting us down right now, and they're very good at killing us in large numbers. If this continues the way it's going, humanity is extinct, no questions. So we take them out and we're saved. Or are we? Because even though attempting communication and establishing communication, which is very hard because these are completely alien creatures, they do not think the way that humans do. They do not function the way that humans do. So establishing communication is a gamble in the first place. I don't even know it's possible, but they're like, we should try this. We need to try and communicate and find a way of achieving peace because we actually don't know what effect taking out the Euro, a previously unknown part of the global ecosystem, would have on that ecosystem, which includes us.
Yeah, like we may not live in the ocean, but we're definitely a part of the ecosystem of the ocean. I mean, we all live on the ocean, even if we're landlocked.
Yeah. I mean, that is a constant thing that the Swarm emphasizes all the time, right? It is an eco thriller primarily. It is emphasizing humanity's relationship with the ocean and showing us why we need to work to undo what we can and protect what is left as far as the ocean's health. Because the Ur are effectively a physical representation of the effects our damage to the ocean can have. It's just that they are making it more, and they are a personified vengeance almost. They are a physical, tangible representation of the consequences for our actions. All the things that the Ur are doing to us, the vast majority of them are things we are already doing to ourselves. Climate change is is destabilizing methane hydrates. That is a very actual real threat that can have disastrous consequences.
And the year may not explicitly be real, but there could be any number of ancient prehistoric nasties or just, environmental damage and potentially diseases anyways in some of those blocks of methane because again, we already know a gas leak is bad outside of the water. Think about the potential consequences of a massive chunk of hyper condensed gas leak exploding out into the ocean.
Yeah, it's like it destroys the surface tension is the immediate effect. Ships sink because the methane getting into the water and bubbling it up breaks the surface tension and the ships can no longer float on top. So that's the immediate risk to being over a destabilized hydrate.
Yeah, first most base effect, the floating stops working the way it's supposed to.
Then you've got the fact that these like slabs of like methane ice are basically holding chunks of continental shelf together. If that goes away, there's now spaces and stuff and rock and dirt starts falling, which causes massive landslides, which in turn cause colossal tsunamis. That's a very big problem, and that's not even the long-term problem. The long-term problem is, of course, all of that methane is going into the atmosphere one way or another, which then accelerates the already rampant greenhouse effect we are dealing with, which means the weather gets bad, rain becomes more toxic, so on and so forth.
Yeah, plus, like, destabilizing chunks of, like, the foundation of our continents and stuff together. It's real bad, real scary. Like, all the jokes people have made about the possibility of, for instance, like California or Florida floating away. That could unironically be caused in places by the rate of these blocks getting destroyed.
The crazy thing is that they're not even the most at risk parts of. I don't think my US geography is not as good as it probably should be, but it is the sort of northwestern side of the US and that sort of part of Canada as well is actually at huge risk of a massive tsunami.
Yeah, it'd be real bad.
There's a really major fault there that is very much due for a very large earthquake. So if you live in that part of the world, have fun with that information if you didn't have it yet.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's one of the things that I love about this story, right? Is that so many stories that use the ocean as a source of horror or as wonder or of any of these things that the swarm does all of. They really struggle to understand both just the to give a sense of the scale that we're dealing with, both when it comes to the problems and just the environment itself, but also how everything is connected to the ocean in some way. So many stories, it seems like wasted potential, or they don't fully comprehend it, or the research hasn't been done. They just don't think about how major changes to the ocean will affect everyone else because they don't think of the ocean as part of human life, even though it is an essential part of human life. And everything is deeply connected to it. Life started in the ocean, and that connection has never gone away. The Swarm is fantastic in the fact that it deeply understands and has been very well researched to get to this understanding, but it deeply understands that anything bad that happens to the ocean is one way or another going to come back and bite us in the ass.
yeah, you can't win against something where everything that could possibly hurt it is also going to hurt you, and you're already hurting it, so what does it have to lose from hurting you? Like, it's worse than mutually assured destruction.
Well, it's not really mutually assured destruction is the thing, right?
It's
Because
not.
the ocean and the Ur is the manifestation of the ocean effectively in the story. They are not dependent on us the way we are on them.
No,
The food chain isn't a loop.
it is not. It is something we dip into constantly while trying to stay out of, but I was gonna be like, if you wanted to compare it to something a little more human, the situation makes me think of when you hear stories about, somebody going to jail or getting hurt or whatever because somebody who was bullied, abused, mistreated, and hurt for a really long time snapped and then did something awful to whoever it is that's been tormenting them this whole time. Because what do you expect to happen when bad things keep happening and happening and happening? How is there supposed to be any fear of reprisal or concern for what's happening when someone snaps and does something awful if it feels like the worst things were only gonna continue to happen if they did literally anything else?
Yeah. It
Like,
doesn't matter what if it's a human or a bear or a weirdly intelligent sea amoeba. If you push something enough, it will eventually retaliate. And ultimately, retaliation, especially intelligent, calculated retaliation, is a numbers game. And what it comes down to is the consequences of my retaliation bad enough that it's worth continuing to endure the threat? And a lot of the time, the answer to that is going to come back as no.
especially because in this situation, humanity has the exact same question, and, for us, the consequences actually are
Yeah,
equivalent, whereas the thing that's trying to kill us no. What does the ocean, what does the ocean have to lose if we die? Oh, yeah, less artificial coral reefs,
but that's fine
and
because they'll have more real ones.
yeah, exactly. But, all the real ones stop getting destroyed so much, oil stops getting drilled for, the chunks of the ocean stop getting fished into emptiness, like, oh no. Oh no, it could be so horrible, and God, so much life comes from the ocean. This is a kind of morbid thought, but I kind of find myself wondering that if we did die out, especially in relation to, like, something like this happening with the ocean, how long would it be anyways before we were, like, literally replaced? Like, before something else evolved out of the ocean and went to land?
Hard to say. I mean, like, there are a lot of very intelligent creatures in the ocean already and on land already. Nothing on the scale of humanity, but
Please don't give the Earth to dolphins. Don't do
yeah,
it.
I mean, but that's the thing, like, you've hit the nail on the head, right? Is that the reason that The Swarm is so good as an eco thriller is because it does such a good job of painting this picture of it doesn't like there is nothing we can do to win. Every action we take that harms the ocean, whether it's retaliating against the Ur or it's the drilling and the mining, the fishing, all of it is going to hurt us more than them in the long run.
If your enemy has nothing to lose from hurting you and everything to gain, then you've already lost by making an enemy in the first place.
Especially when you have everything to lose from continuing the fight or from winning.
Yeah. What the only way to win was never to play, and, well, bad news. You started it.
Yeah, exactly. It does such a good job of illustrating that dependent relationship we have of the ocean, which I think is I love. I love that.
Yeah, it's almost kinda like the ultimate encapsulation of "Don't bite the hand that feeds you." And it's like, well,
Yeah,
we have been for
almost
a long
literally.
time. Yeah, Literally, we have been for a long time.
But yeah, that's one of the major things. The other thing that I really like this doesn't really necessarily tie super directly into our theme of the ocean. This part, to be fair, in a sense, you can swing it by pointing out that by bringing it back to like the mystery and wonder side of it. But one thing I really love about this story is that how it handles the Euro as an alien entity, not alien in the sense of space alien, alien in the sense of they are completely outside of the human experience.
Yeah, and foreign to our understanding.
Yes. Most of the time when you get a sci-fi story, and I know I keep talking about it being a thrill, eco thrill, but because of the Euro, it is also sci-fi. It's just very hard sci-fi and very low tech sci-fi, but still sci-fi. But so often you get in a sci-fi story or even fantasy to it when you with different intelligent species. These creatures from across the stars, they are effectively just people with with a green paint on or whatever. Their cultures, the way they think, the way they are biologically constructed. We so rarely do storytellers successfully think of a creature that is actually an alien intelligence. They're not just humans with a different skin cosmetic.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if they're people, then we're gonna humanize them no matter what, because it's the only lens that we understand the very concept of people through.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong. I don't mean to like shit on every sci-fi or fantasy writer ever because it's hard to write a true intelligence that is also truly distinct and different to humanities.
Especially when we have no true evidence of, like, which way other societies would even be likely to go if they're out there. For all we know for all we know, the other life in the universe could be literally anywhere on the whole spectrum between something completely incomprehensible to us, or there genuinely could be something out there that might as well just be humanity under a different coat of paint.
It is quite possible. In fact, for memory, a lot of sort of oh god, there's a word, is it like astrobiologist or something like that? A lot of evolutionary scientists have posited that it is even quite likely that there would be creatures with very similar biological structures to us because it's convenient. It makes sense that creatures with our attributes would survive and do well in an Earth-like environment.
Yeah, because our understanding of evolution and intelligence leads us to believe that these are, at the very least, fairly normal traits for facilitating an intelligent life.
Exactly. But chances are also very high that whatever other intelligence are out there are completely incomprehensible to us, or at least radically different to us. And that's why I love the Euro, because they are one of maybe two or three examples I can think of off the top of my head for an intelligent species that is not just human intelligence, but it looks different. They biologically and intellectually do not think on the same time frame, on the same scale, or even just the same functionality as humans do, because the Ur are a collective intelligence. They pass on information through the process of single cells splitting and interacting with each other and changing their DNA, their internal structure to reflect new information. Their learning is programmed into the species. As long as their species persists, so does the information they have. And they think as a collective unit. The entire species is effectively one big brain, which is so different from humans who really, really struggle to think outside of themselves and their immediate circle. Which is why we have this conflict in the first place between the Ur, who see things on this large scale across all of their species' existence time frame wise, compared to humans who are extremely short-sighted and taking short-sighted actions that are inevitably going to be destructive to them and everything else.
Well, on the upside, the year is a great way to prevent humanity, even though it wasn't us that did it in Mass Effect. That should make sure we never make the mistake of inventing the Geth. Because the year runs on a very similar concept. You'd have to be stupid to be almost wiped out by that thing and be like, what if I made that?
Yeah, I don't know enough about Mass Effect to comment, but yeah, like genuinely speaking, like the like time aliens, like heptapods, I think they're called or something from Arrival. Those are the two main ones I think of where they're like aliens that genuinely think and function in a completely different way to humans.
Yeah, I won't get into the whole thing, but I made the comparison because the Geth in Mass Effect are very interesting in being like the only sci-fi example I can think of a collect. They are literally like the robot and AI equivalent of a collection of single-celled organisms. The
Okay.
Geth the Geth exist as a hive mind that is made up of like an infinite number of different programs, and each program is its own program, and they always come together. So the more Geth in an area, the smarter they all are because they're always communicating and always working together. And it's not about how many bodies there are, which is why the only important Geth character in Mass Effect, what makes it special is that it's just literally more Geth programs stuffed into one body than any other Geth are, which allows him to be, for all intents and purposes, a full person.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's just a similar thing of like I can't everything else I can think of hasn't really done that in sci-fi. Not to go off topic for a sec, but kind
Oh,
of cool to see
maybe
that be
we'll
done
talk
through
about
a
that when we do our sci-fi cycle.
kind of cool to see that done through a non-organic lens for once.
Yeah, but yeah, back to our boys, the Ur. Well, actually, very much not our boys because they're single-celled organisms and do not have gender or sex. But
Their grandpa's knee. It's the ocean being like, "Don't think just because you left, you're too old to go over my knee, you little shit.
honestly, yeah.
Keep throwing rocks at my porch. See what happens." Sorry.
You think you got to throw some fucking rocks? Here, have half the ocean on your head.
Here, have a disease.
But one of the things that's really cool about the swarm, and I talked about this a little bit, I think, when we briefly summarized some of the stuff about it in the season two finale, is that all of this wonder and terror and mystery of the ocean is always highlighted so strongly because it is constantly juxtaposed with mundane human drama on the land. I mean, like everything from major human drama to really mundane, petty bullshit.
Yeah, and it all just feels so unimportant in the face of what's really going on. With it can be easy for the audience to feel that way sometimes, but remember, you're not being shown that to put yourself through the frustration. You're being shown that because that's actually the kind of frustration the real people trying to solve these problems go through.
Yeah, like I think a really good point of comparison is a story I've had I've complained a lot about. The original book version of Jaws, right? Where
Oh
we are
yeah.
introduced to a lot of petty human drama, like primarily the strains in the Brody's marriage and Mrs. Brody's attempted fling with a Hooper. And all that human drama and shit takes up at least half the story. But the thing is, because of the thematics, it was never about the same things as the Swarm. So in that story, that mundane, petty human drama hurts it because it's taking away from the focus and the themes of the story, which is basically, hey, maybe when there's a bad thing happening, we should take some action to stop that bad thing. Also, sharks are scary. It takes away from the focus. But in the swarm, this very similar content a lot of the time. The tension between Lund and Johansson, the very like sexual tension, to be clear. compared to the more emotional tension because of their different beliefs about their heritage that Jack and Leon have. You know, there's very human, often trivial drama frequently at play, but it serves a purpose in the Swarm. It serves a purpose in that one, it highlights how insignificant these problems really are compared to the ecological threat we are currently dealing with that we have created. But it also highlights how different the Euro and humanity are. It shows how humans have these very narrow, short-sighted focuses, these very small circles, compared to the Euro with a very wide-reaching understanding.
Yeah, we're not the best at agreeing what's important.
We are constantly given an understanding of the scale of what is actually going on here and how important it all actually is and how alien and different it all actually is because it is constantly shown next to this mundane human silliness. And I think that is very clever. And it's unfortunate because it would be very easy for that to go over people's heads, I think. Like I've talked to other people who have read this book, who I've made read this book, and often they're like, "Yeah, it's really dense." First there's a lot of actual well thought out science written in this book to explain things, which already turns some people off. But then they're like, and then all of a sudden, we've gone from this like, oh, what's going with the worms to Will Johansson and Lund Vang, and it's like, yeah, I can understand because why your knee jerk reaction to that would be like, can we get back to the ocean stuff now, please? But if you take a step back and think about it, it is actually a really important part of the story that we're seeing all this because of that contrast element, because it highlights everything that the story is trying to tell us about how humans think and about how the Euro think and about the scale of the problem and the just general alienness of the ocean compared to what we're used to.
Especially when ultimately our only real defense, aside from mutually assured destruction, which again should never really be considered an option, is to try to make the year feel something like we do.
Yeah, because the basically the solution to this story, the thing they can't do at the end, and this is while everything is going completely to shit. The ship is sinking. People are starting to try and kill each other because, I mean, humans, am I right? Everything's going very badly, and it's coming down to the wire. This the scientist versus the military basically as they are desperately trying to one not all die before they can solve the problem and then b solve the problem before the military kill all the Euro and everything else as a result. And the solution they actually come up with is basically almost a bit of trickery using the way that you're think with this sort of programmed collective intelligence by injecting their pheromones and stuff into a human body and then sending that body out into the ocean because they would then, coagulate together and pass on their information. And what slips in is this information that humans aren't so different to them. We're a part of this massive ecosystem too. You shouldn't get rid of us because we're all part of a cycle. And even though it's not strictly true in the same sense, because again, the Europe have nothing to lose from our extermination and we have everything to lose from theirs. It manages to solve the problem without breaking the main, like, theme of the story. Even though it's not strictly true, it still emphasizes the
Yeah,
main theme of this story, which is the interconnectivity of human life in the ocean.
and it also proves that we should be trying to coexist with it beyond just the practical aspect of it, in that, like, no, look, the Ur aren't just a defense mechanism. They are actually motivated by the health and stability of the ecosystem to the point where recognizing us as a part of it made us stop being a disease to eliminate.
I mean, what I do like about about the solution, right, is the not only does it continue to emphasize, like, it beautifully emphasizes the entire XP of the story without feeling heavy-handed. But in the aftermath, which is something you don't see much of in the show, unfortunately, but there's an epilogue sort of segment in the book, which is from Samantha Crow's perspective, the alien research lady, and she sort of sums up the situation. That's where they talk about how there's still the plague going on in Europe because of the lobster problem, and she talks about how a lot of religions are having to do a lot of adapting and are kind of in crisis because what the fuck? We none of the texts talk about these guys, and they were here first, you know. But it's very clear that this peace is tenuous. It is not guaranteed. The Euro could still decide at any moment. Actually, no, fuck you guys. You're still a problem. So the epilogue isn't like, and everything was happy ever after. We went back to how things were. It's like, no, this new knowledge that comes from this bizarre place, the ocean, that has always been there. Like, this isn't something new has happened. It's we've learned something old, and we've learned how interconnected everything is, and we've learned that we have to change and adapt, or the ocean is going to kill us because it's the only way to save everything else.
We are on probation. We are not free and clear.
Yes. Yeah, the ending of the story, it not only emphasizes this main theme, but it continues to emphasize it into the epilogue where it's saying humanity is having to change and adapt and become a non-disruptive part of this cycle of this massive global ecosystem that is primarily based out of the oceans because we're the problem. We are killing ourselves if we don't change. And that's I mean, that's the whole point of an eco thriller. It's to point out through drama and a little sprinkling of horror that and tension, so much tension, that we need to change and how we do things. We need to take actual action or we're going to kill ourselves. That is basically the crux of every eco thriller, but I think The Swarm just does it so elegantly and intelligently that it kind of stands on its own from
Yeah,
most
it does it
others.
really well. I can't think of any other eco thriller where I'm actually as invested in the eco part of it, and it's clear that it mattered a lot and was very
Yeah,
important to the author, and he did not just a lot of research, but a inordinate amount of thinking on the subject. There's a lot of feeling and emotion put into this, and not just a bunch of facts and a bunch of humanity is the real villain and actuallys.
yeah, you can like as far as the research go, like he researched so heavily that a scientist actually sued him for plagiarism.
You used my work to make your movie. And I was like, and you're mad about that? Or your book?
And yeah, I mean, his argument was like his I mean, I feel like it was a bit more complicated there, but basically Schatzing's argument was like, "No, I just heavily researched, and your research became an important foundation for my narrative." The lawsuit was dropped and they settled out of court, but, like, just to give you a hint of how deeply researched and accurate to the research the story is that and it comes across like there is a lot of actual science you have to read through in The Swarm. It is dense and occasionally dry, but it's so good and never does the genuine reverence for the wonder and the horror and the mystery and all this alienness and otherness and also important integralness to our own lives that is the ocean. That is all of that is always still there. It never fades away behind the drama or the science or anything like that.
My stupid auto-generated wallpaper, I'm only just now thinking, decided today to make the wallpaper just in the middle of the ocean, a tiny little island that has pretty much nothing but a little stone loading platform, a tiny dock, and a lighthouse at one end of it.
That is amazingly thematically appropriate. Also because that is literally a description of one of the settings in the story.
What the
It's where I can't remember what her name is because she's a composite character, in the show, but there's like, research student who lives in the lighthouse.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You basically just described where she lives. and works. It's hilarious. And how thematically appropriate to the episode. Good on you, randomly generated wallpaper.
Yeah, it does feel right too because like, ha ha, he said a thing, a catchphrase, but like I feel like one of the most important parts of it's an important part of every eco thriller, but much more or eco thing I should say, but much more with the swarm than a lot of other stuff is that we're we're not an island. Everything we do ripples and affects everything else. And since what we're talking about is the ocean, even if you want to try to claim you are an island, what can an island do about the ocean?
Yeah,
Islands are at the mercy of the ocean too.
more than most things, arguably.
It's like you don't even have to go so far as to say no man is an island. Fine, you know what? Be an island if you want. See if that matters when the ocean is mad.
Yeah. But on that note, like I could keep talking about this story for hours, and I may or may not repeat myself if I did that. But between this and the season two finale, I do think we've covered enough to leave it here, especially because we are kind of reaching our time anyway. So we can leave that one there, and just with a note that everyone should watch and read The Swarm. If you are listening to this on Spotify or YouTube, you can also listen to these podcasts on my website, radfordwrites.com. I also share stories there. I write articles there about primarily writing related things that you can read about. You can also buy my books through the site, which I always appreciate because it helps me keep doing this. And you can, of course, also find John streaming as Sephia, Sephear, on Twitch or with VODs posted on YouTube.
Yeah, and also uh like don't just let this story be an isolated thing. Let this be evidence that eco thriller as a term exists for a reason. You can find plenty of interesting, gripping, thrilling stuff that talks about this real thing. Don't be afraid that just because it's related to all that stuff, it's going to be preachy. It doesn't have to be. I know there are a lot of people who are at least decently environmentally minded, but avoid all of this serious stuff because they are not ready to be preached to.
Yeah, the Swarm. It's it like you could call it preachy, but I like to think it falls more into the category of educational, inspirational.
I would say it's definitely not preachy at all, especially because it's not telling you to think anything. It is telling you what is happening regardless of your opinion, and I like that. I want more stuff that talks about this stuff to be blunt and be like, "Listen, you don't have to listen to a word I say, but this is what's fucking happening whether you like it or not."
Honestly, yeah. So on that note, yeah, go read The Swarm, watch The Swarm, and remember that if you pick a fight with the ocean, you are going to lose. Goodbye.
The ocean much bigger than you.